There it sits on the cutting board, still soft the day you bring it home, and by the third day, the crust has gone tough as a boot heel, and the middle has turned dry and crumbly at the edges. You cut off a slice anyway, chew through it, and tell yourself you will finish the rest before it turns. You do not. By the end of the week, half a loaf is sitting there gone hard, maybe a spot of green creeping along one side, and it goes in the bin while you feel that small sting of having wasted good food and good money both. It does not matter much whether that loaf came out of your own oven or off a real bakery counter down the road. The path is the same either way. Soft and good the first day, tolerable the second, and by the third you are choosing between eating something dry and unpleasant or throwing it out and starting fresh. Plenty of households have simply stopped baking their own bread at all because of this, deciding it is not worth the work if it only lasts a couple of days anyway, and going back to the soft-bagged loaf from the store that at least seems to hold up longer on the shelf. People blame the bread. They say fresh bread just does not keep, that it is not built to last the way a store loaf is, that this is simply the price of baking your own or buying from a real bakery instead of a plastic bag. That is not quite it. The truth sits somewhere plainer. Nobody ever sat you down and showed you how bread actually goes stale, or the handful of small habits that stretch one loaf out for weeks instead of days, the same way our mothers and grandmothers did without ever thinking twice about it. I am Anna Beiler, and I keep house here in Holmes County the way my mother kept hers, and her mother before that. If this is the kind of plain, useful help you came looking for, go ahead and subscribe. And tell me down in the comments what state you are watching from. Let me say one true thing before I show you anything, because I would rather you trust me than be impressed by me. There is no trick on this earth that keeps a loaf of bread soft and fresh forever. Bread is not built for that, and anybody promising you a loaf that never changes is selling you something. What I can promise is this. Handled the old way, one loaf holds its softness and its flavor too, sometimes 3 times longer than it will sitting out uncovered on the counter, and when it finally does go firm at the very end, there is still good use left in it. Nothing goes to waste, not even the last hard heel. A crusty bakery loaf and a soft sandwich loaf stale a little differently, but everything I am about to show you works for both. Bread does not go stale mainly because it dries out, though that is what most folks assume, and it is why they reach for plastic wrap, thinking they are sealing moisture in. What is actually happening inside that loaf is that the starch, the very thing that gives bread its soft structure when it bakes, begins to recrystallize as it cools and sits. The water inside the crumb does not leave the loaf so much as it gets pulled out of the starch and locked away where your tongue cannot taste it and your fingers cannot feel it as softness anymore. Bakers call this retrogradation, and it is a change in the starch itself, not simple drying. It happens fastest at cool temperatures just above freezing, which is exactly the temperature inside your refrigerator. A loaf kept in the icebox can turn hard and gone in a single day, faster than the very same loaf left out on the counter in a cloth. A few seconds of heat can loosen that locked-up starch again for a little while, but it is a short reprieve, not a cure. Keep that one fact about starch and cold temperatures in your head, and half of what people do wrong with bread storage stops making any sense to keep doing. If this is doing you some good so far, subscribe and turn on notifications so the next one finds you when it is ready. Start with the loaf while it is still warm from the oven, or fresh from the bag if you bought it from a real bakery counter. Let it cool all the way down on a rack before you wrap it or box it up at all. A warm loaf still carries steam inside it. And if you close that steam into a bag or a box right away, it turns to moisture sitting against the crust and the crumb, and that damp patch is exactly where mold takes hold first. Give it the better part of an hour, sometimes more for a big loaf, until it has gone fully cool to the touch clear through, not just cool on the outside while the middle still holds warmth. Keep the loaf whole for as long as you can stand to. Every cut face you open on a loaf is a raw place where the crumb sits exposed to the air, drying out and staling faster than the rest of the loaf around it. Slice only what you plan to eat that's sitting, and when you are done, press the cut faces back together if it is a full loaf sliced in the middle, or turn the cut end down flat against the board or the plate if you keep it standing on end. That seals the open wound of the loaf shut again and slows the drying at that one spot considerably. Now, I'll tell you something my mother used to say. A remedy you can't remember is no remedy at all. You nod along today, and by the time you need it, half of it has slipped away. So we gathered everything up. Every trick I've shared here, and a good many I haven't, written down plain and sorted by the problem. When something goes wrong in your house, you open it, and the answer is sitting right there. The link is down below in the description. You'll find the link down below in the description. It costs less than one trip to the store for something that won't work half as well. Wrap the loaf in a clean cotton or linen cloth, not in plastic. This is where most people go wrong without meaning to. Plastic holds moisture in tight, and that sounds helpful until you notice that trapped moisture does not spread even through the loaf. It pools in whatever spot touches the plastic closest, and that damp pocket molds while the rest of the loaf underneath it is drying out unevenly at the same time. A cloth wrap does something plainer and better. It holds a little moisture near the crust, enough to keep it from turning to leather, while letting the rest breathe out slowly, so no single spot ever sits wet long enough to spoil. In a humid summer kitchen, a single layer of cloth is usually plenty, since the air itself is already carrying moisture. Come winter, when the house runs drier from the stove and the wood heat, a double layer of cloth or a cloth over a paper bag holds just a touch more moisture near the loaf, without ever sealing it shut the way plastic does. Any plain cotton flour sack towel works fine, and so does an old linen pillowcase, washed and free of any soap smell that might carry into the bread. Check on the loaf every day or two instead of leaving it wrapped and forgotten. Unwrap it, brush away any crumbs, and let the cloth air out a few minutes before you wrap it back up. That habit catches the start of any mold long before it spreads. Once it is wrapped, set it somewhere cool and out of the light. A wooden bread box, a covered crock, or a cupboard shelf away from the stove and away from any window the sun reaches in the afternoon. Wood does something a metal or plastic box cannot. It draws off a little of the extra moisture on its own and lets the loaf breathe through tiny natural gaps in the grain, which keeps the inside of the box from turning into its own damp little world the way a sealed tin can. Heat and light both hurry a loaf towards staling faster than plain room temperature will, so a dim, cool corner of the kitchen does more for a loaf than any amount of clever wrapping if the wrapping ends up sitting in a warm, sunny spot regardless. Do not put the loaf in the refrigerator, no matter how safe that feels. I know it seems like the careful thing to do, the way we are taught to refrigerate nearly everything else that might spoil. Bread is the exception. Because staling is a change in the starch and not simple drying, and because that change runs fastest at refrigerator temperatures, a loaf you tuck away in the icebox to protect it will actually turn hard and dull days sooner than the same loaf left wrapped in cloth on the counter. The cold that keeps your butter and your meat safe is the very thing that ages your bread quickest. The only exception worth knowing is a very humid kitchen in the height of summer where mold is setting in within a day or two no matter what you do. In that case, a short stay in the refrigerator, eaten and used quickly, beats losing the whole loaf to green spots. But it should be the last resort, not the habit. For a loaf you truly cannot get through in a week. The freezer is the honest answer, not the refrigerator. Slice the loaf first, so you can pull out only what you need later without thawing the whole thing at once. Wrap it tight in a way that keeps the air off it. A double layer if you have it. Press out as much air as you can before you close it. And mark the date on the outside, so it does not sit forgotten for half a year. A frozen loaf holds its structure for a month or longer without the starch recrystallizing the way it does in the cold of a refrigerator, because a hard freeze locks everything in place all at once, instead of slowly pulling the moisture out of the starch the way a mild chill does. Pull out only what you need, a slice or two at a time, and let it come back to room temperature on its own, or toast it straight from frozen. The rest stays untouched, and just as good as the day you sliced it. Do not thaw a whole loaf and refreeze what you do not use. That second freeze breaks the crumb down further, and you will notice it the next time around. When a loaf has gone past soft, no matter what you did, there is still one more thing to try before you call it finished. Run a little water over your hand and pat it lightly across the crust, just barely damp, not soaked. Wrap the whole loaf loose in foil and set it in a warm oven for 10 or 15 minutes. The heat drives that surface moisture back into the crumb and loosens the starch just enough to bring the softness back for that meal, even if it will not hold for another day after. For a single slice rather than a whole loaf, a hot, dry skillet with a lid over it does the same job in a few minutes, turning the slice once, and it works nearly as well as the oven without heating the whole kitchen for the sake of one piece of bread. It will never be quite the loaf it was that first morning, but it will be a long way from the hard brick it was headed toward in the bin. And when the last of it truly will not come back soft no matter what, that is not the end of it either. Hard heels and dried out ends make some of the best bread pudding you will ever eat, or French toast that soaks up custard better than a fresh soft slice ever could, since the firmer crumb holds together instead of falling apart in the pan. Cube it small, dry it further in a low oven, and you have croutons or breadcrumbs that keep in a jar for months, ready any time a soup or a casserole calls for them. Come the holidays, a bag of dried bread cubes saved through the fall becomes the stuffing that goes alongside the turkey, and nobody at that table will ever guess it started life as bread you nearly threw away. My grandmother never once threw out a heel of bread in her whole life. She said a stale piece was just bread waiting for its second use, not bread gone bad, and she kept a cloth sack in the pantry just for collecting the ends until she had enough for whatever she meant to make next. Now let me tell you plainly who benefits from you never learning any of this. Walk down the bread aisle of any grocery store and look closely at what is actually inside those soft plastic bags. Most of that bread is built with dough conditioners and preservatives whose whole job is to keep a loaf feeling soft on a shelf for a week or two under bright fluorescent light, not to taste better or nourish you better. That softness is manufactured to survive the trip from the factory to your kitchen and to fool your hand into thinking freshness when what you are really feeling is chemistry, doing a job that cloth and a cool corner used to do for free. None of that is a conspiracy sitting in a back room somewhere plotting against you. It is simpler and quieter than that. A loaf that keeps well without any of those additives, using nothing but cloth, a cool corner, and a little patience, is a loaf the store never had a reason to sell you, because real bread handled well does not need a shelf life measured in chemicals. The whole business of soft bag bread depends on you not knowing there was ever another way, and once you do know, you simply stop needing what they are selling. Try this with the next loaf that comes into your kitchen, whether you baked it yourself or brought it home from a bakery counter. Let it cool fully. Keep it whole as long as you can. Wrap it in cloth instead of plastic and set it in a cool, dark corner instead of the icebox. Come back down to the comments after a week and tell me how it held up for you, and tell me your county while you are at it, and how many loaves your household goes through in a week. I read every one of them, and I like knowing who is out there in a kitchen somewhere doing this alongside me. Next time, I will show you how my mother kept a crock of butter fresh and sweet for a full month without any refrigerator at all, using nothing but well water and a bit of salt. Thank you for sitting with me through this. Subscribe if you want more old household wisdom, and the next video is right there on your screen when you are ready for it.